I think there's this stupid modern idea, which is religion should be private. And it's just the dumbest idea. It's impossible. It's like having a private language. I think Christianity, we have to take back the public square in our businesses, in our families, in our lives. Everything is under God's reign, in my view.
Welcome back to Prosper, everyone. I'm your host, Andreas Widmer, joined as always by my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Sioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America. Today, we welcome on the show someone I've never met before, but who has both a great personal story and a great practical advice for heads of growing companies. Meet Andrew Jacoby, the CEO of Good Shepherd Staffing. He's also the Chief Innovation Officer at Growthera, a company he founded. He's also a musician and a convert to Catholicism with a powerful story of how he came to faith.
We're going to get into all of that shortly. But first of all, welcome, Andrew. And we always like to get out of the gate with two quick questions. One, what time do you get up in the morning and why? And two, what's the best thing that you're reading right now?
Yeah, I get up in the morning whenever I wake up. It tends to be between 5 and 7. I try to make daily mass because, in the Lord's Prayer, it says our daily bread. So I try to make that a daily thing. I'm not saying I'm 100% on that, but that's the goal. And I would say the best thing I'm reading recently is something called Benedictus, which is a daily reflection book on Pope Benedict, Joseph Ratzinger. And I love his writing. I think he's a very profound writer. And so every day I like to read something that he wrote because I just find he's an amazing writer and a very profound human being.
He speaks right to my heart. So you guys, we just meeting, but you're my buddy right away if we're bonded in Benedict.
He writes so simply and yet so profoundly. I love it. I highly recommend any of his writing to anybody who's listening.
So, of course, I'm a big JP2 fan, as everybody knows, but I cannot defend him as an easy writer because he's a little, let's just say he's a little complicated when he writes. And so any one of his books are treated like syrup. You have to add water to it. But the way I call Benedict's book is like honey on my lips. It's you can just ingest it right away, and it's sweet and beautiful. And this is basically how he spoke. That he could just.
Andreas, is your mother tongue German?
Yeah.
So you can read him in the original German. It must be even better.
I tell you, you're going to be jealous, Andrew, but I actually met him several times because I work with JP2, and it was different ways I met him. It's going to take us a little bit off topic, but it's a cool story. I never really talked about it publicly. I was in front of the Pope's apartment on when they went to Germany, to Berlin. And because Ratzinger was the highest prelate of Germany in the Vatican, and he would go with him on his apostolic visit to Germany. And I remember how they went to Berlin, and before I went I was there in the evening in front of his apartment. I had a night duty, and I watched the news just before in the barracks before I went on duty, and I saw how when they drove in the Pope mobile, Benedict or Cardinal Ratzinger and John Paul II, you could hardly see them because they had the Pope mobile with the full enclosure, and it was all covered with eggs and tomatoes. Because as they drove through Berlin, they were like barraged with, because of what they said. And so then I'm upstairs at the apartment, and then suddenly it knocks, and I got notice that Cardinal Ratzinger would come up and have dinner with the Pope to debrief. And usually when you let somebody in, you wait until the Pope gives you the sign when he's ready. And for some reason, he just came back from travel. For some reason, it took a long time. So Ratzinger was with me alone for the longest time because John Paul wasn't ready. And so we knew each other for other reasons. Every cardinal like that as a Swiss Guard, but we knew each other personally because we had a friend in common, and we had like dinner together before. So I'm like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? And he says, no, not at all, Andreas. Ask away. And I said, listen, I know this is personal, but I just saw you in the Pope Mobile and how they threw stuff at you. I mean, how do you take this? Like, what do you say about these people? And he stood square, he looked square at me, and he says, well, Andres, these eggs were not meant for Joseph Ratzinger or Karl Wojtyła. These eggs are for the message we're bringing. I feel for everybody there, but I'm not bringing them my message. I'm bringing them the message of the Lord, and I have no authority to change that. And so I'm not judging people. I'm not angry at them. I just say sometimes the message of the Lord is difficult to accept or digest, and there's going to be a reaction. But by no means do I take this personally, because I told him, I feel so horrible for you. If I were there, I would get so angry that they're fighting with me like this. And it just blew me away that he actually didn't see this in a personal way at all. He saw this as a way of him proclaiming the message, the gospel, and like saying, I'm not taking this personal. So, but with that said, Andrew, sorry I took a total detour here, but tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started your career, how you landed where you are. Maybe it has a Benedict connection in it.
Oh, I don't know. I started as an artist, as a musician and a writer, and then I found it difficult to make a living that way. And also,
like what kind of music?
I was playing. I would say in my college years, I was very interested in folk music and country music and blues music. So typical American forms, Americana music. Over the years, I've grown to love classical music, though I don't play it. It's too hard to learn, and I don't know. One day, so I was trying to do that, and I found it was a very difficult way to make a living, and it also, at least the way I was doing it in the 90s, was putting me in environments that weren't so great. A lot of time in bars, so I started to go down different kind of addiction routes through that. So it was I thought that it would be better for my mental and physical health to get a job that didn't involve being in a bar every day. But I didn't know what to do because I was unqualified to do anything. I was on a pilgrimage to California from the East Coast to go to the John Coltrane church at the time, because there was a church in California for John Coltrane, the saxophone player. And he was a big influence of mine. And on my way there, I got a job somehow. The only job I could get was selling cars. And because they would hire anybody to sell cars. It doesn't matter. They have a completely Darwinian method of business, which is if you can fog up a mirror, you get the job, and they expect to fire everybody within 90 days. So I happen to be really good at it. However, I don't know. I was coming from the East Coast. I was hustling. I come from a Jewish business focused family. I just was natural in sales, and I really enjoyed it, actually. I grew up in an athletic pursuits, so I liked the competition of business. There's aspects of it that I had abandoned for art because I thought art would be free of the hierarchies of business, of competition and whatnot. What I found is that they were all subterranean. So they all existed, but they became feline. Instead of them being out front, Andreas, you think you're a better tennis player than I? Okay, well, let's go on the court and let's find out. But if you think you're a better guitar player, or you should be in that band, but I shouldn't, and that's all just opinion, really, at the end of the day, mostly. I mean, obviously, I now believe in objective beauty standards as well, but let's leave that aside. In general artistic circles, it's harder to determine hierarchies there. But that doesn't mean hierarchies go away. So anyway, there were parts of it that I really liked. But car sales I found to be somewhat of a professionalized, organized crime in that they make money financing poor people. So I didn't really feel good about the business that I was conducting. So that was in the late 90s, and that was Silicon Valley time in San Francisco where I lived. And so a friend of mine called me up, said, I'm getting married. I was 25. I said, why would you do that? I was a different time. He said, long story, but what are you doing? And I said, I'm selling cars. And he's like, well, there's this computer thing happening. And that was the beginning of my career doing sales from a telephone. And then that led me to the ability to do sales remotely from a telephone, because if I was doing it from a telephone, it can be done from anywhere. And that led me to traveling the world, and ended up building my first business, Growthera, as a replication of what I was initially doing while traveling, which was I was working about an hour a day doing cold calls, and then I was playing music. I was actually living in Vienna, playing on the streets as in the Wiener Linie U-Bahn program. So I'd play music on the streets to make a living.
Wow.
And then I decided at 45 that long-term strategy, probably street musicianship, was not a great solution either. Because if you get sick, you don't make any money and that kind of thing. So I decided to try to generalize that sales knowledge that I had picked up over the years and what I was using to kind of supplement my income. And that was the first business. I moved to Macedonia, the ex-Yugoslavia. We started a business in 2018. I was the CEO of that business for 3 years. And then I actually hired an ex-client of mine to be our coach. He had built and sold multiple companies, was in the coaching business. I hired him to be our coach. And then he got sick of coaching because he said nobody did what he told them, what he told them to do. And he was really an operator. He wanted to get back in the seat where you're actually controlling things. But he didn't want to start from zero because he thought that was too messy to test hypotheses. We had built a business that was doing good revenue.
So that was in Skopje?
This is in Skopje. I moved to Skopje, Macedonia. I was living in Vienna before that. And then I lived abroad for 15 years. And
beautiful.
I was then living in Skopje.
I used to have a company, and my company had an office in Skopje. I spent a lot of time there.
Oh, really? No way. That's great. Yeah, Mother Teresa's house, and it was amazing. So I lived in Skopje, and we built a business in Skopje.
And that was a software business, or what?
No, that was an outsourced sales business, an outsourced sales development as a service business. Now they do a couple other things, but we were basically appointment setting, which is what I was doing in sales previously, essentially. And I just generalized what I was doing personally. And I think right now, I'm not sure, I don't work in that company anymore. I'm still on the board, but I have about 84 people there in that region working there. And we have a CEO from the States, and everyone else is overseas. So I left that company as the operator, took a little time off, and then I started a new company, Good Shepherd Staffing, because I had a very strong, one reason is because I had a very strong conversion to the Catholic faith. And I wanted my company to represent spiritually where
you had that conversion in Macedonia, or what?
Yeah, it was first in Macedonia. I mean, I think, my conversion story is more or less started with via pulchritudinus, in Latin, the way of beauty. So I was kind of lost in this, I would say, New Age for a really long time. Buddhism, Eastern religions, Be Here Now, Eckhart Tolle, if you know the German spiritual teacher. I was in that world, and I would end up doing a lot of prayer and meditation sessions in the churches of Europe because they're beautiful and quiet. And then little by little, though I wasn't open to the church's claims of truth because I didn't think people rose from the dead, or goodness, because, as a Jew, there's a strong history of distaste with the church.
And there's also some truth about goodness, because you can't trust anybody as a Jew because they end up hating you or killing you one way or the other.
Yes, and I wasn't open to either of those claims. But as an artist, I couldn't sit in Saint Peter's plots in Vienna on a weekend and listen to Bach's Mass in B minor and say that it wasn't beautiful. There was no argument with the beauty. And then little by little, I converted during my time in Skopje. I spent a lot of time in the Orthodox Church. I probably would have been Orthodox were it not for Bishop Barron and his Word on Fire ministry. Through Jordan Peterson, actually, it was first Jordan Peterson's essays or discussions about the biblical, psychological significance of the biblical stories, which is an amazing lecture series, highly recommended to everyone. And then he had a podcast with Bishop Barron. And so I listened to Bishop Barron. He said, this Jungian analysis of the Bible is great. It's awesome. And Jesus is real. And he really died for your sins. And he really created a church. And it's the Catholic Church. Come along, Jordan. And Jordan hasn't come along. He's still like dancing around. What do you mean by I believe in God? All that thing he's doing, which I don't really understand. But I went along because I heard the arguments for Aquinas. And so I want to start my new company. I wanted to be able to pray a rosary at church and in my company, and I wanted to have everything. I dedicated my whole life to God. So I wanted my company, I spend 40 hours a week or more there in my new company. So I just wanted it. I didn't want to hide it anymore as I was in my older company. We would have talks about principles and stuff, but we had Muslims, we have all kinds of different people. So it didn't feel right to pray a rosary and I just didn't want to, I wanted to be fully and authentically Catholic in all aspects of my life, especially my business. So sorry for the long-winded, but that's the...
No, not at all. It's because it's a great story. I want to ask you about the business model for Good Shepherd staffing and what you're doing. But first, was there a moment, like, it's one thing to hear arguments and to see that they make sense within their sphere, but that's not the same thing as your heart actually being moved. Like, what did you have an experience or a moment where you just thought to yourself, okay, yes, this is true and I want to be part of it, not just this is true and attractive?
I think it was slower. I mean, I had a lot of revelations even in the Eastern religions. I was practicing a lot of mindfulness. I thought I was going to be a Zen monk for a while, and I discerned being a Zen Korean monk. So I've had a lot of practice of, let's say, getting in touch with the Holy Spirit in an actual effective way. I just didn't know it was the Holy Spirit at the time. So when the Christian piece came in, I realized that I already had this deep relationship with God and the love between the Father and the Son. And so it was a little bit slower to have a relationship with Christ because of my Jewish background, I think, of sort of like I had a Jesus barrier. But the Holy Spirit and I were bonded even before I became a Christian. And I needed the Jesus part came through his mother, Mary. I had a affinity to Mary. Easier than Christ, and she brought me to him. And the beauty little by little of just hours in those churches of Europe. But to me, I have a very philosophical mindset. So I would say the philosophy piece, somebody put it this way, I was listening to a conversion story, and she said, throughout my life, I had found a lot of the pieces of the puzzles of life. But when I found the church and entered the church, I found the puzzle box. I found the bigger picture. And that's what it was like for me. It's just all fit together. It's like, oh, my life makes sense. I was looking for it and I found little crumbs, but really there's no story to my life. There's nothing that makes sense. It's just, if I'm honest, it's just like a series of experiences I'm having, some of which I like, some of which I don't like. So my strategy in life was, let's maximize the experiences I like and minimize the ones I don't. What else is there to do? Unfortunately, that led me to lots of addictions of various sorts. So it wasn't a great strategy in retrospect, but it seemed to make sense at the time. And then the Christian piece came in, and it's like C.S. Lewis said, it's like, it's not just the light by which that shines it's the light that shows me everything. It's the filter through which I understand all of life. And when that hit me, I was ready for it. I was in my 40s. So I had tried a lot of other things, and it just became clear that Christianity was true, good, and beautiful.
And how did this turn into your company? So you say you wanted to live your faith at the company, and how did that turn into? That was Growthera, or that's the Good Shepherd?
Well, Growthera. I was in the process of my conversion during Growthera. So I was slowly converting, and my conversion happened during my time at Growthera. It's just that I found myself constrained at that company. Also, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm more of a creative entrepreneur. I don't think I'm a business person primarily.
You get bored when it's there.
I'm a creator that uses business as a canvas to create, because I believe in, ours is an incarnational faith. So if I get an inspiration from the Holy Spirit, I want to incarnate that as a way of giving glory to God. So the business part that I'm good at is the beginning part. Hey, you, me, and Rebecca will sit here. We'll have an idea. We'll throw some stuff on a whiteboard. Let's try to make it work before we run out of money. That's fun and interesting. Once it turns into people raising their hand, asking for our paid time off, policies, and the lawyers start putting documents that I don't understand in front of me. Once it gets to that, I'm no use, and I'm an active detriment to the business because I just want to break it and have fun and try new stuff. So actually, once you create a business and there's a hypothesis that's working, really what you need is somebody to dial those knobs and do it more and more. Do what already works.
It's a different
exactly.
talent.
So that's why
it's a different talent, and it's so brilliant that you say that and that you're self-aware.
Well, I'm
because
old, so I've failed enough to know that I'm not that
because I've
good
been
at many.
part of so many projects where the moment comes in time where it's kind of obvious to everybody but the founder that, look, you're actually actively holding things back, even though you were the genius who
100%.
made us to this point.
Yeah, that's why they put me as the chief innovation officer. It was a way of cordoning me off. Like, what can we do with this guy? Let's put him in a laboratory somewhere. And even that didn't work. My CEO came, Bryce, whom I've known for a long time, and I was I was an SDR for him, and now he's my CEO. He came to me. He's like, "Look, man, I can't create a different rule book for you. So like, you either have to get on board with what I'm doing here, or you got to leave." And I was like, I'd rather leave. I'd just rather start something else where I could create my own little world. And so the new business, Andreas, is we're helping Catholics in developing countries, especially the Philippines, although South and Central America as well, find work that enables them to make a local living wage, but also work from home so they can build and maintain family relationships. Because in the Philippines, for example, people often live in what's called the provinces, smaller towns. And in order to make a living, they got to go to Saudi Arabia or they got to go to Manila, and they're spending hours on buses to Manila, and it's a nightmare. So for them to be able to work from home is a real blessing to them because it enables them to be with their families. So I just thought that was a really wonderful way to do it. And I find especially the Filipino people just such lovely, faith-filled people, and I feel totally at home with them. We have some cultural differences. There's like a little bit of an honor culture that I don't have as much as they do. Like, they're not as open as my Macedonian employees of telling me that I'm stupid and what I'm doing is not working. Like, they're a little bit more like respectful of authority in a way that I don't think is helpful for me personally. I'd rather know if I'm doing something stupid. And my Macedonian and Albanians, like, they have no problem telling me like, hey, that was really dumb and you stink at this. It's like, yeah, So anyway, so there's some challenges, but I find the Filipino people in general so beautiful and faith-filled, and we all just give glory to God in our workplace. And I had this idea that, like, I think there's this stupid modern idea, which is religion should be private, and it's just the dumbest idea. It's impossible. It's like having a private language, as your colleague DC Schindler, who I interviewed on my other podcast, by the way, he's on. I have an interview with him on the cultureoflifepodcast.com. If anybody wants to go, it's really amazing. He's amazing. He's one of my heroes.
He is amazing.
So anyway, so it's like impossible. So I wanted to be, I think Christianity, we have to take back the public square in our businesses, in our families, in our lives. Everything is under God's reign, in my view.
And so you only employ Catholics?
Yes, some people kind of lie to us. Like, I found one employee who's actually a Jehovah's Witness. So, but like, she kept that quiet. So I don't give I don't give them, like, I don't force them to sign on that they support the magisterium of the church. We work in Catholic countries, and everybody's pretty much assumed to be Catholic, or at least they're okay with us being very Catholic in the company and praying
like
rosaries. So are they lying? I don't know.
No, but who cares if they're Catholic or not, as long as they know what they're getting involved with. It's like we at the Catholic University, we're unabashedly Catholic, but you don't have to be a Catholic to work here. You just have to tolerate what we're doing here. And in a way, be on mission in terms of, I like this word, being on mission, to say, look, we're trying to be Christ-centered, and we want to work with people who don't just make more, but become more, and so on. And if you're on mission with that, it's fine with me. I don't,
100%. I don't have children. So my first company was with very many young people, all early career, early 20s people. And so I took it as my mission in the company to develop them as human beings. I thought business results were a secondary outcome of them learning to tell the truth and them learning to work hard and be grateful for their lives. And those are the things that I built and was important to me, because I don't find business for business's sake all that interesting. It's okay, but it's not like my favorite thing. But human potential development, I think, is very interesting and very important.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think there's a lot of, like, an audience full of potential entrepreneurs or people who are in business and figuring out how to scale, who are thinking about these culture issues right now. So how do you get us people to be honest if they're not honest?
Yeah, I believe in people need to be repeated to more than they need to be taught. So we just would repeat. We'd have it used to be a daily call until they cordoned me off to once a week. And I would start the call with telling everyone that they were going to die and that everything is important, so that their lives, that what we do on a daily basis is really important, because we don't get, this is our time. And then I would tell them, I would just repeat to them over and over again the importance of telling the truth in life, because we are a service business. So the edifice of our business is our agreements with one another. And if they're based on falsehoods, what does that say about the building that is our business? So if we lie to our customers, or our customers lie to us, or, it's sort of, that's the way to hell. Because what is a lie? A lie is you believe that you're the control of the world and you can manipulate the future to your liking. So that's like totally taking, instead of, the opposite of that would be the humble speaking of truth, which is that you accept that reality exists independent of you, and you're there to conform yourself to reality, to truth. So in a business context, if you don't have a product, it's super easy to see that all the business is your word and my word. And if that's false, you won't be here very long, because our business won't be here very long if it's based on a lie. So I believe that it's all people, it's all culture. And again, I wouldn't have believed that until I hired hundreds of people. And I thought the culture stuff was stupid until I actually ran a company. And now I believe that the culture stuff is everything. I think culture comes from the Latin cultus, which is like what you love. And so the business is really like you're creating a place of love. You're creating a place of creation to serve others. That's what you're doing in a business. It's a communal way of serving our fellow man. So if that's not love, I mean, what is? So I think that that's the development of people in greater and greater service and love is the goal of every endeavor, and especially business.
Andrew, you could teach our class. Rebecca and I teach a class. What you just did is the summary of our class. And let me get back to you.
Happy to do it. I love to run my mouth, as you see.
Exactly. No, we'll do it. But we need to take a quick break, because we want to invite people, our listeners, to our Spring Family Business Consortium meeting. But we'll be right back after this with more from Andrew Jacoby.
Did you know that family businesses account for 2/3 of America's GDP and are responsible for creating 6 in 10 jobs in the United States? That's right. Family enterprises like yours are the backbone of our economy, the heart of our communities, and the keepers of legacies that span generations. We think about family business differently at Catholic University's Bush School of Business. That's why we created the Family Business Consortium. Just as the family is the first and essential cell of human society, family business is an indispensable part of a flourishing economy. We know that running a family business isn't just about the bottom line. It's about balancing Sunday dinner conversations with boardroom decisions, preserving your family's values while innovating for the future, and building something meaningful for the next generation. Think of us as your extended family in business. We connect you with top industry experts who understand your unique challenges, whether you're looking to grow while staying true to your values, managing the delicate balance of family dynamics and business decisions, or planning your succession. At the Family Business Consortium, we've created a community of peers who truly get it. They've sat in your chair, faced similar decisions, and found ways to thrive while keeping family at the core of their success. We host 2 free full-day seminars annually, available both in person on our gorgeous campus in Washington, D.C., and online. Our next gathering is Friday, October 17th. Our mission is simple: to help generations of family businesses like yours grow in every sense of the word, professionally, personally, and purposefully. Because when family businesses thrive, communities prosper. Find out more in the show notes to the podcast or at familybusinessconsortium.org. That's familybusinessconsortium.org. Welcome back to Prosper. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Andrew Jacoby, founder of Good Shepherd Staffing. Andrew, right before the break, we were talking about culture and building company culture. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you know, as a business owner, when it's time to bring more people, bring someone else on. And also, I heard you say in another podcast, you talked about you used to want to go it alone, and now you believe in a team. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about your evolution there and what advice you might have for current business owners along those lines?
It's a good question. And yeah, I would say the biggest unlock in my career was my partner, Darko. I had always saw people as a cost center. And they were potentially, I'd gotten in some arguments with people and I just thought like it was just a net negative to work with people. I'll just do it myself. I'll make more money. I'll keep all the money. That was I'm not saying, by the way, that's not a good strategy, by the way. I didn't make any money. I was playing music on the street at the end of that strategy. So, alone. And it was also came from bands. I got kicked out of a lot of bands because it's hard to remain in bands. So I just had an aversion to people. And then I met Darko. And I remember when I met him, he looked like a character out of the Lord of the Rings, this Macedonian guy. He's this really skinny guy with this raspy little red beard and braces and super funny looking dude. But I looked at him and I said, like, you're my guide. You're my Virgil. Like there's something about it. And he was just this amazing person who had a weird language and a weird accent and came from a poor country. But man, when I started to work with him, all of a sudden me just running my mouth started to turn into like active. Like I would say to do stuff. And in my world, that's all I needed to do. I got the dopamine hit of having a new idea. And that was it. That was like the closed loop of Andrew's life. And then when I met Darko, he would listen to me and he'd be like, oh yeah, that's good. And then he would actually do stuff. And he'd come back to me and say, okay, now what? I'm like, wow, stuff happened here instead of me just running my mouth. This is like brand new and novel. This is amazing. Well, let's do that. And let's do that. And so we had this great partnership of his youth and energy and actual do stuffness and my ideas and whatever experience that I had. And it was just an amazing partnership. So when to bring other people in was very difficult. One of the reasons I was working with people overseas was because I couldn't afford anybody else to work with. That was it. So I was sort of forced to do that. Now, once I started doing that, I lived overseas and I just kept finding people who were really talented and I thought underpriced in their labor. So I just was like, as a business owner, I'm always looking for arbitrage. So that was how it came. And then to answer your second question, Rebecca, when you should bring people in, it really depends because obviously you need some money. You know, there's this famous coach, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, and he doesn't let people in this program unless you're making like a certain amount of money. So it's easy for me to say, if you have no money, you should, what are you going to do? You just have to do everything if you have no money. Okay. Once you have money, I think the best thing you can invest in is yourself and your education. Second best is other people to help you do stuff. And even if you can't afford them, you can make partnerships with them where you give them pieces of equity or whatever. But to complement your skill set, to me, is the most important thing you can do to grow your enterprise. Because like I'm a musician, so you can't sing harmony by yourself. You need another person. You need two voices for harmony at least. And so I would say in business, having other people is what makes it real.
And so eventually you started your new company, Good Shepherd Staffing, which is basically, so they work from home. That means it's online work. And they code or they do customer support or what do they do?
No, that's a great question. We're still evolving, but where we are currently is we work with vocational schools in the Philippines. And so what that means is these are people who have paying money. These are people in poor countries taking money out of their pocket in order to pay to educate themselves about how to be remote workers. Usually basic admin type tasks, building lists, social media management, video editing, all that kind of back office, basic admin stuff. As part of their education, they have to complete an unpaid internship for 30 or 60 hours, depending upon what school they come from. So what we do is we match them with US or European-based business owners, entrepreneurs, executives to complete their internship. And then afterwards, the companies can hire them through our agency if they want to continue to work for them. And so these are basic admin workers. So you figure rates are currently between $5.50 and $8 an hour. So that's the basic business that Good Shepherd is in currently.
And And what does your, like, for people listening, what does your customer look like? What kind of customers do you get in?
Oh gosh, what I love about this business is massive total addressable market. It's basically anybody who has work that they shouldn't be doing on their plate to do and has a little bit of money to have somebody help them with it. So what does that mean? We have our last client was these two girls who are 15 years old, and they have a musical band, and they hired a woman in the Philippines to help promote their band. So, like, did I think that would be our clientele before? No, they happen to be daughters of another client, but they're their own client. So it's like,
how do you deal with so what about account management between them? You let them just loose on each other and say, okay, have at it?
Right. That's a great question. This is the difference between the old company, which was a business process outsource. So we're managing the entire process. The new company is more of a pure staffing play. So you'll get a CSM, you'll get a customer success manager, and she's managing multiple clients, and she's checking in on both sides on a weekly basis. But we're not managing what they do, but we're checking in. Hey, Andreas. Hey, Rebecca, how's the relationship going? Because we will replace the resource, the human resource, if there's a problem. Like, that's part of our service, is we make sure you always have someone that's productive internally there. So we try to remediate any problems that are existing using our CSM function. But if there's problems that can't be remediated, we will replace the person, because we're constantly bringing on new reps and vetting new talent. So that's the service we handle. It's a light kind of HR and finance service, and a light recruiting service, like a sort of recruiting piece as well. But we don't do custom recruiting up front, only once you become a client. We did that in our first year, and it was a mistake, because we ended up spinning our wheels and doing a lot of upfront recruiting for people, building lists of candidates, and then they never hired anybody. So we wasted our time, in my view. So the new model is much cleaner. It's much simpler. For everybody starting a business, simple scales, complications don't. Find a simple business model. One customer, one acquisition channel for that customer, one offer. Keep it simple.
That's great advice. We, in the class that Andreas and I teach together, we have our students launch an actual business. It might be something very simple, like just an affiliate blog of some kind, but getting people to keep it simple and to think a lot about, to hone in on the customer segment is the hardest lesson to teach, because everybody thinks they want to go big and do everything.
Yeah, it's the famous entrepreneur, Y Combinator, Paul Graham, has the theory of the wedge. You just have to pick one wedge. You just wedge yourself, your little nose under a door anywhere in any market, and you go from there. So you like Mark Zuckerberg started at Facebook only at Harvard. He didn't start everywhere. It was just Harvard, and then he expanded to the other Ivy Leagues. So you can expand, but first just start for solve some particular problem for some particular person. And then expand from there is much better. And simplicity is the way to go, to get really good at one particular thing. Then you can scale it from there. In my view, that's the way I've found success.
I love that. I want to radically change the subject, because
Sure.
I see that our time is dwindling down, and I really wanted to ask you this question, which is, you talked about, I think you talked about business as your canvas for doing stuff you want to do. And then you're also a musician. And one of the things that Andreas and I always focus on is, for those people who are called to it, business itself can be a form of self-expression and creativity. And so I wondered if you wanted to comment on that, or say that it's, nonsense.
Well, I think that it's definitely compromised for me, because there's a piece of like pragmatism that's built in. Like, I think Oscar Wilde, all art is useless, meaning like when you do art, you're simply doing it for the joy of doing it. That's really it. There's not a super, in my view, pragmatic thing when I write a song, or if I write a poem, it's purely just for the sake of the creativity. And so business is a way of using that same creativity, but there is a pragmatic element. That's just my own personal experience with it. Other people view it as purely like an amazing creative. I wouldn't put my creativity to business were it not for the fact that it's also a way of making a living, and I need to, make a living.
You need to eat?
Yeah, I need to eat. So it's just like a nice compromise for me, because I didn't love when I tried to just monetize my art. There was compromises. I love to keep my music and my poetry and my writing and my podcasting just because I want to do it. And if you want to pay me, I'll take the money, but I'm not doing it for the money. With business, I'm trying to solve a problem for money. Like I'm trying to solve both sides. That's what I'm doing. And so
it's an interesting compromise. Isn't it Joseph Pieper who says that leisure is what you do for its own sake? And I think we can include art in that. And he says the highest form of leisure, correct me, Rebecca, if I'm wrong, you're more on the saddle on this, but the highest form of leisure is actually adoration and prayer, because you pray God for God's glory and not for anything else. But art is beauty, and so you practice beauty for its own sake. It's often a thing. I think we can compromise on this and find a common denominator. I do not think you should. One of the leisure things is what people would call a hobby or something. So it's diminishing. Hobby is a diminishing word, but take your passion and your beauty passion and don't make it your profession, because in a way it changes its purpose. You won't do it for its own sake anymore. And especially art itself might be something you want to do for its own sake. And then don't mistake that for what you do professionally. We more mean it in the sense, and I wonder what you do with that. We more mean it in the sense that God's creation mandate to us is, after God created the world and eventually the human person and us physically and so on, breathed his spirit into us and said, kind of, receive the creator spirit. Be like me. I created all of this. Now I invite you to continue the creation, and we will call that work. And therefore, the creativity of work is to continue God's creation. So we get to, like we make this podcast together right now, that will exist afterwards, which it didn't exist before. And it's in a way participating in God's creativity, creative power, that we can create this. That's what we kind of mean with the creativity part. Not art in the pure sense, but nonetheless artistic in a sense of creativity like God, because then when we collaborate with God in this creativity, we actually become more like God, which is why work is a path to holiness.
yes, I would agree with. Yes, all of the creative acts are service to glory of God and the service of our fellow man. And I love that I can use my creativity to help people, especially people in poor countries that don't get a lot of opportunity. To me, it's amazing blessing. Okay, I write a poem and people might enjoy my poetry, and that's awesome. That's amazing. But to help somebody get a job who wants to stay with their child and feed them and do so in a way we make sure that the clients treat them well. And if not, we'll find them another client. And that really it's very special. It feels very good. And I see people especially because I have more experience with my other company, these are young people who are supporting their families. Like, I'm talking about their parents. So they make more, like a young 23-year-old kid makes enough money to send money back to his family in Albania. And to see the pride of that and to see the sort of joy that he gets for, being able to help, it's really deeply rewarding. In a different way. Not that, again, it's not diminishing writing a song or writing a poem or doing a podcast. All that's also great. It's just that this adds an extra element.
It's a cool thing. I really admire what you do here, because many of us in business, I take me as an example, do very little leisure. I started my career very late. I always felt like I had something to catch up on. And so I end up basically just do work. And then, in a sense, my only leisure is prayer or mass and adoration. And then beyond that, I don't make music. I don't take time to do these kind of things. Maybe Lent, might actually be a good time for us to actually add leisure, because that's something you're doing really beautifully. And you're really conscious about this, to say to what I admire that you recognize leisure and you want to stay not polluted and not put a financial means into it. Have you come to this, or you've always done that?
I have this interesting difficulty, which is that my true love is learning. study. Like I just have an intellectual, philosophical bent. Like if I ask, like, what's my favorite thing is seeking to learn about what's true in the world. Because I think learning about what's true means learning about God. I didn't know that before. Now I do. So I'm even more excited to learn. But it's always been hard because, I just want to sit in the library and read. It's like, I think Borges, the Argentine poet, said to me, like heaven would look a lot like a library. I'm paraphrasing. But it's sort of, but that's a hard, okay, well, nobody's going to pay you to read. So what do you do with that? And it appears like, oh, you could write or you could, I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to read. I don't want to write. I don't want to teach. I just want to read. And so I have always had this struggle of like, okay, the things you really love are not things that probably people are going to pay you for. So you have to decide and figure out a way to make a living. And how do you do that given that you're probably not a great fit for the corporate environment? When my first company became a corporation, its antibodies kicked me out because I'm not suited for the corporate environment. So even though it was my company, I wasn't suited when it became big enough to be a company. It's weird, but it's true. So I think it's like Garry Kasparov said this. He says, when you're teaching somebody chess, the first lesson in learning how to play chess well is you have to figure out the kind of player that you are. Are you a defensive, calculating type player? Are you a swashbuckling, like really active player? Because you have to build a strategy on your nature. Like Aquinas says, grace builds upon nature. So you have to understand a little bit about yourself, know thyself, as Socrates said. Yeah, exactly. And then build your strategy of how do you get around the golf course of life. Like, how do you do that? It depends on how you see each shot and how you see the world in general. And so to me, I was like, okay, well, my best way to actually get by here is to combine my creativity with serving people in a sort of pragmatic way, but also trying to build these elements of like, again, I tease the young people into the business with sort of professional success, but what I was really trying to feed them was personal growth, was character development, and the importance of being a good person. I used business as a way of doing that, but really that's what I was trying to teach them, like my children. I wanted them to learn from my mistakes, that they didn't have to go down the sort of dark roads that I found before I found the right road. And so, that was the mission for me in business. And so that was how I combined the creativity because of that difficulty of really all I want to do is go to the library and read all day, every day.
Endlessly fascinating. Unfortunately, time is up, and I just want to thank you for this conversation. It's absolutely amazing. Rebecca, what do you think?
Amazing. And what's really amazing is how much we could have just stand you in front of our students and just
happy to do it.
Into our syllabus.
I'm happy to do it anytime, please. We should do that.
We really should do that. But before we go, where can listeners find you to connect? We're going to be sure to put show notes, like links in the show notes and all of that. But
well, if you're interested, if you've ever thought about having a remote virtual employee, but it's been kind of like something you're scared to do or haven't done, go to goodshepherdstaffing.com and reach out to us. We're happy to put you get a 30 to 60 hour free work from them, and you're helping them, the representative, out complete their education. So it's like a win for both. You have no obligation to hire the people. So that would be the first thing you could do to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew Jacoby. You can find me, the bald guy. I'm the bald Andrew Jacoby from Philadelphia. I don't really post a lot on Twitter or any other social platforms. I don't even have a cell phone, so I'm hard to find on these like platforms. But yeah, so I think that'd be the best way. LinkedIn, probably.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was so wonderful.
It was great to meet you. And friends, as always, leave us a great review if you enjoyed this show, and leave us feedback on our social media feeds. We would really love to hear from you.
Yes, I can only agree with that. Thank you again. And Andrew, we're sorry to let you go, but we hope to see you again soon. And Rebecca and I will be right back for our parting thoughts. That was great, wasn't it?
So fun.
You know, what's fascinating to me is I always tell our students that what I'm telling them is not me. It's just Catholic thought. It's like, if you pull on that string, this is where you end up. And here's a man that I have never met in my life before, and he articulates something because he's a seeker of truth. He articulates it exactly the way we teach it as well, because this is not our truth or his truth. This is the truth. And you end up in the same place. I think it's just very beautiful, and I do hope that we get him into our class one day.
Yeah, me too. I really don't have anything to add to that. It was just so fun to hear somebody who's on so much on the same bandwidth, and he has a lot of good practical advice too about how to move from the beginning stages of a company into really scale. So it's worth following up, not only on this episode, but other places where he's spoken.
That says it all. That's our time for today, friends. Take care. Until next time, we hope you prosper.